Morning, everybody. Hope you're having a great Friday so far today. Sorry, I thought I heard a child. Anyways, so I was just reading an article by Firelight about Llewellyn and pagan publishers, and it's called "This Is Paganism" or "Our Pagan." I don't know. Anyways, but it's by Firelight. It's a great article mostly about Llewellyn. And about only getting one perspective. And as I made that video the other day about seeing things from different perspectives and experiencing and going out, this really seemed to resonate. It's really important and something that needs to be talked about. In the pagan community, it's only been since about the 70s that we've seen publications written about this. They started with Gerald Gardner and other authors. Doreen, Scott, Cunningham, all of these authors. But if we make a list, they're all white. So in the 70s, it's kind of anticipated. But then flash forward to 2019, and you look at the list of authors being published at Llewellyn, it's still mostly white. And so reading Llewellyn when I first started, if you go to the bookstore, if you go to Barnes & Nobles or even your local pagan bookstore, most of the books are going to be published by Llewellyn. It is one of the biggest pagan publishers. And I always assumed that there was like a whole committee of people who really decided what books got read and put out and published and what authors and this and that. The article by Firelight really points to the fact that the problem is that there's only a few people over there, one in particular, who actually have the final call into what books get put out. And when you start to think about that, and I'm not saying this person is racist or that they are doing something bad, but you're only seeing things from their perspective. So this person has all of these things, and they're like, okay, in my opinion, these are the books that are going to sell, these are the books that are going to do well, these are the books that I want to put out. So you're only getting that one person's perspective, or those 3 people, or those 5 people, whatever. It's not a very large number of people over there who actually decide what books get put out. So that means 7 out of 10 pagan published books that you find on the bookshelf are brought to you by this one person, these couple people, and it's their perspective that you're seeing. Now, in a world where there are so many beautiful opinions, there are so many amazing perspectives, there are so many different ways to see things, it's sad and it seems kind of silly that the majority of the books that we read and are presented with are from this one group of people's perspectives. So, and then those people aren't very eclectic in their nature. Most of the books that Llewellyn puts out are either Wiccan or beginning paganism, which makes sense. But then there's this point where you're like, okay, well, I've read all of Scott Cunningham books, I've read Amber's books, I've read the Green Witch books, I've read these other books. Now where do I go from here? And you're starting to look for some more diversity, and you're starting to look for something deeper. It gets harder and harder to find. You might find Gardner's books or Bucking, whatever. I am not a big fan of his books because he's very much my way or no way. Anyways, so you find a lot of those books, and they're higher magic books. You'll find stuff on like the Solomon Seal and esoteric and kind of in that direction, but you kind of get stuck there. And that's when it's time to reach out and find a new perspective. And it's sad that these big publishing companies are not reaching out to that and are not living up to that standard and trying to put more information out there. I think that they would definitely find some success if they were providing that information. But as the article pointed out, the Firelight article pointed out, even on those topics, like if you look up Latin magic or you look up voodoo and hoodoo practices, the majority of the authors putting out those books are white and not Not black or indigenous or people of color. They're people who are white. And as a white person who does not want to read a book by another white person about Native Americans, I'm kind of sad that that is the fact of the matter. If I want to learn about an indigenous culture, or I want to learn about, uh, shamanism from another perspective, I don't want to see it from a white person's perspective. I actually want to hear about it from a Native American or a somebody from South America, or from somebody from Peru, or somebody from Nigeria. I was doing a lot of research on Nigerian religions and cultures and holidays, mostly actually. I love studying holidays from all around the world. I think that it's a great way to look into a culture's expression of their religion. And so I love studying holidays. So I was studying Nigerian holidays, and I was looking, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce all these words because I'll butcher it and it'll be horrible. But there was a holiday in particular that's honoring the Iron God, and all of the things that I was reading about it just didn't seem to click. There seemed to be some pieces missing. It just wasn't making sense because everything I was reading was from white people. And actually caught a lot of flack in one of the groups I'm in because I asked, I said, well, hey, look, I'm looking for some good sources. And luckily there are some really great people in these groups that were like, hey, this white person is asking all of us people of color these questions because she wants real sources. She wants good information. Ironically, none of those places were helpful. I was actually helping somebody on a different post about Egyptian mythology and where to find information about Egyptian mythology, and I was recommending a great book for them. They happened to be from Nigeria. They sent me a friend request. We ended up talking. Great guy. I asked him about this holiday and about the Iron God, and he sent me back pages of information. He actually practices this holiday. He does this. He lives this. This is his life. And so when I was able to ask him, all of the pieces suddenly came together and things made more sense. I was like, oh, it clicks. I understand. Like, I couldn't, and I even told him, I said, oh my God, this is so much information. I'm going to have to print this so that I have it physically to look at, so that I can highlight and I can reread it and look at it again and again. Like, how can I share my gratitude with you? This is beautiful. But it wasn't in reading the archaeology reports. It wasn't in watching the news documentaries or the culture documentaries or all of those things. It was actually asking somebody who was of that faith and of that culture and of that community, and they were able to give me an answer in which was like fulfilling and real and factual. So now back to the Llewellyn books. Specifically when you're talking about root work or hoodoo and Haitian and voodoo and it would be a bruja, but there's bruja something. I don't know exactly what it is. I just learned this word this morning, but it's that Latin magic, which I love learning about. They are a very an expressionative culture. Their magic is very expressionative. It is very like, and it's beautiful. I told my husband we were watching a documentary, and they have all the candles in the temple, and the people are laying in the middle of the candles, and the brujo is running around, and he's spitting vodka on all of them, and the candles are flaring, and they're singing, and I was like, I would love to lay there and get spit on by this guy. Like, that just sounds like an amazing experience. And that's not something that I can experience here. And like in this place that I live in and around, like, that would take a lot to get to the point of being able to experience that. And I would love to be able to experience that. But I'm definitely not going to be able to recreate it in my backyard. One, I don't have those practices. And even if I did all of the things, it would not be the same. Because I don't have that knowledge. It just isn't there. I didn't grow up in that. But even with all of the things that I've learned about Latin magic and about Peruvian shamanism and all of this kind of stuff, have a lot of knowledge, but I could not write a book about it and say, I know these things. I might have read them, but I did not experience them. And so here's another aspect of when you pick a book and you're reading a book and you're looking at authors and all of these things. Okay, so Gerald Gardner got his information by 1, researching, 2, reading King Solomon's Guide to High Magic, and then he went out and he spent time in Africa with African cultures who still practice their native religions, their indigenous religions, and experienced that with them. And then he brought that back to Great Britain and to white people and was like, this is what I experienced, this was beautiful, and I want to share this with people, and I'm going to create this religion. And then it picked up with the whole Satanist movement and all of that, and the famous people, blah, 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 okay? If you don't know what I'm talking about, go find some history books. Learn about the religious movements of the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Anyways, so this white guy went to Africa and brought back this religion and created Wicca. And that's great. It's a great reawakening for a lot of people. It's a nice transition because it's very formal, seeing as how it's written. It's a lot based off of this book by King Solomon, and if you're familiar with who King Solomon is, he's a big figure in the Bible. So it's really easy for that transition to happen because you're going from Christianity to Wiccan, and then you can whatever. So, however, again, this is the experience that I'm talking about. If you are only reading books by people who only experienced these cultures through reading, it's like that game Telephone, where everybody sits in a circle and you whisper in each other's ears and you say the same thing, and by the end it's monkey tail when it started out as something totally different. That's how that information is going. So it's happening in the culture, and whoever observed it is sharing it with that person, and it's going around this train, and each time it's being colored by the eyes of the person who's seeing it and then relaying it, so it's changing. And you're not getting the perspective as the culture gets the perspective. You're getting the perspective of the person who got it from the person who got it from the person through that perspective. And when you it's just funny to me that we are stuck in this place where we're reading books by people who didn't really experience these things. I mean, I'm not saying that all white people who write books about voodoo have never experienced voodoo. There are white voodoo practitioners who this is their life. They have experienced it. They live with these deities. They live in this culture. This is very much who they are to the core of their being, and more power to them, and I support them for being the person that they need to be. But then there are also people out there who are not and do not and have not and still write those books. So I guess really all in all, with the rantings and the thinking about the perspectives and how you're getting this information, and when we start talking about the difference between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation, to appreciate a culture is to actually value that culture, to earnestly want to know more about that culture, to approach it with an open mind and understanding, and to be willing to accept things that are different from your own belief system as their belief, and that's okay, and to be able to learn that and to appreciate that and to respect that and to see the beauty in that. To appropriate it is to say, oh, I think that's a good idea, I'm going to take it for myself, and not even know anything about it. And I mean, I want to say a great example would be the god Pan. And when Christians saw the god Pan, they were like, oh, this is perfect. I will appropriate this image and I will make it into what I want it to be, and it will become the devil. Even though the devil is not in the Bible. Just saying. So, with that... And it seems like such a silly thing to relate to. Like, how is that? But it is. It's the same kind of thing. When we see something in a culture and we're like, hey, I like that. I'm going to take that for my own. And that's not the way that it should be approached. If you see something in another culture and you're like, hey, I really like that, then you need to stop. You need to take the time to ask somebody from that culture, to learn from that culture, to learn about that culture, to learn the history of that culture, to learn about what the people, I mean, so I recommend everybody, if there is there's a lot of us who say we're eclectic pagans. For all of those who are eclectic pagans, go out and find something about, even if you're not eclectic, if you're a Norse pagan but you're not from Norway or that region of the world, you're not Nordic, and you say that you're a Norse pagan, maybe you need to learn more about that culture to just better understand that. I recommend going and eating something from that culture. I recommend going and reading their stories, their mythology, and learning about their holidays and how they practice their holidays, and not just the whitewashed version of their holidays, but the actual practice of their holidays. So go out and learn something with respect. Learn from someone who has actually been of that culture, someone who is African American or somebody who is Haitian. Like, they're going to have your good voodoo, hoodoo information that's going to be real and legit and experienced, and not from Karen, who decided she was going to write a book about Native Americans. One of the quotes from the book, or the Firelight article, was that the author embodies the aloha spirit, because she's writing about indigenous religions. And here's the thing that really gets me about that one, is that there are Hawaiian indigenous people who still practice their religion. And don't you think that they would do a much better job writing a book about it than this lady who embodies the aloha spirit? I'm just saying. Okay? So start to think about that. When you're picking a book to read about an indigenous culture or a black culture or people of any kind of color or whatever, why don't you check to see if the author is actually of that culture, and start there. And let's ask Llewellyn to make that change and to start finding indigenous cultures to represent, to start sharing deeper information provided from people of that culture who have that experience and that wisdom to share with us. Because I imagine if you went out and you asked someone of color about their, Jujubee is a great example. Awesome TV show, awesome thing. They got a lot of great stuff going on over there. I was very excited to see some Netflix got involved. I'm very excited for them. But I imagine if you went to her and them and all of the people that work with that project, I imagine more than one of them could write you an amazing book that would be much more insightful than one written by a white lady. So, just saying. Maybe we need to ask Llewellyn to make that change. Maybe we need to expect that when we pick up a voodoo book, that it's written by someone who actually practices that culture and not someone who saw it and thought it was cool and decided that they would do a bunch of research and write a book about it. As someone who does a lot of research, I could write books all day long about all the different kinds of religions and cultures around the world and throughout history. But I'm not an expert. And I definitely didn't experience that, and it just ethically doesn't seem right to me to put that information out there and to then profit off of it and to just continue this cycle. And so, with all of that ranting, I would just like to say, go out, check who your authors are, know where you're getting your information from. Okay, wait, I can't stop there. There's a whole nother subject on this matter, okay? So, talk about cultural appropriation and using things from different cultures and where we get what and ba-da-da-da-da. Okay, so let's talk about white sage. Let's talk about your stones. Let's talk about your salts. let's talk about where you're getting a lot of your magical items. Now, we want to talk about, I had a conversation with someone once, and she told me if you use any pesticides, chemical pesticides in your yard, all of your garden magic is null and void. Okay? Now, that's a little extreme. It's a little too far for me. It will, and I don't think there's an all or nothing kind of in anything, but I do think that you need to take some things into consideration. So, when you read books about the ancient druids collecting mistletoe, they did it in a certain way with the knife, dressed in a certain way, under a certain moon, at a certain time of the year, and all of those things. And that's one of the things that gave it such magical properties. Now let's talk about salt. We love our colored salt. We love our fancy salts. We love our salts from other places because we're like, oh, the Himalayan salt has the Himalayan energies of that mountain. Da, da, da. And the ocean salt has the ocean energies, and the seaweed salt has this. Okay. I would like everybody, when you're done watching this video, to go find a video on how salt is made and where salt comes from, and not like fancy, whitewashed stuff. I want you to actually look at the Himalayan salt mines and see where your pink Himalayan salt comes from, and then never buy it again. And when you see, you'll know why. Okay? Same thing with a lot of the stones that we get. If you're getting a stone that comes from a certain, let's say India. India has more slaves than any other country in the whole world. Yes, I said that. Slaves. They have a lot of slaves. And pretty much anything that is mined out of India is probably mined by a slave. Now, if we want to stop these practices and we want to stop this, we, as the people who are purchasing these things, have to stop purchasing them from them. And that's the only way that this is going to change. And if suddenly they're in India and they're like, hey, how come you guys aren't buying any more of our rocks or our cloths or our dyes? We can be like, oh, well, there was this whole global pact of no more slavery, and as countries who signed that, we are not going to buy from you anymore because we can't guarantee that your stuff is not done by slaves. And the dollar is really, in the end, the only thing that speaks. So what are you spending your dollars on? Again, check who your authors are. Check where your products are coming from. Look up the stone. If you're looking for a stone that only comes out of India, maybe find a different stone. We don't want to talk about it because we get our vegetables from Mexico, but maybe we should look into some more Mexican farming videos and see how those people are treated and where our tomatoes and avocados are coming from. Just saying. I just really think that when all of this protesting stops and it's not on the news anymore and it's not trending and it's not cool to be that, what are you going to be spending your dollars on? Are you going to go right back to spending your dollars with these companies who are doing these horrible things? And it's not just authors, it's not just one thing, it's everywhere, it's all over the place, and it's important to know. So, now, with all of that being said, and my rant continuing, and now my video is almost 25 minutes long, I really think that it's important that you check where your stuff comes from. Know who is making these goods, and who is mining these goods, and who's getting that salt out of the earth, and who is doing those things, and then think about the value that brings to your magic. Having that, honestly, all I can think of right off the top of my head right now is malachite. Having that malachite in your spell because it brings the energy that you really need for prosperity. Is it really bringing that prosperous energy when it was mined by a slave who was forced to work there because if not, his family would lose the only home that they've ever had, and his children have to beg on the corner in order to feed them because he doesn't get paid, he just gets that home, and the justification is, oh, well, I give you a house to live in, that should be enough. And that's not enough. So, let's know where our stuff is coming from. Let's know who's writing our books. And I hope that everybody has a fantastic day. don't forget to like and subscribe. We will talk to you soon.